At exactly 2:15 a.m. Eastern Time today, the red lights flashing across Bloomberg terminals in Manhattan told a story the mainstream media is desperately trying to ignore. The Strait of Hormuz is functionally paralyzed. We are no longer talking about isolated kinetic extraction or localized skirmishes. According to raw telemetry data confirmed by Reuters this morning, shipping insurance premiums for supertankers have violently spiked by over 400% in just 48 hours. Brent crude is aggressively tearing through the $85 resistance line, and Goldman Sachs macro models are quietly pricing in a catastrophic $100 per barrel scenario. While the public is hypnotized by the movement of Ohio-class nuclear-powered submarines in the Persian Gulf, the real war has already crossed the ocean and landed directly in your portfolio. This is a synchronized critical infrastructure failure of the global energy grid. The mathematical reality is that 20% of the global oil supply is currently trapped behind a wall of asymmetric warfare. Are you prepared for what happens to your 401k when the American inflation engine reignites overnight? $900 million. That is the exact amount of capital evaporating from the global equities market every single hour this blockade holds. Commercial satellite imagery analyzed by AXIOS at 0600 hours shows a terrifying reality. A massive armada of very large crude carriers is completely stalled outside the Gulf of Oman. They are trapped. They are refusing to transit the choke point. According to maritime intelligence desks at Lloyd's of London, the war risk premiums have surged so violently that moving a standard cargo through this corridor is now a financial hemorrhage most shipping conglomerates refuse to sustain. We are witnessing an economic surgical strike. The adversary does not need to sink a $10 billion U.S. Navy aircraft carrier to win. They only need to deploy a barrage of $3,000 smart mines, and the entire global supply chain suffers a systemic shockwave. Mainstream media networks are heavily sanitizing this data because the political establishment cannot survive a gas station panic. If you want the raw telemetry and the unvarnished truth before the markets open, you need to hit the subscribe button right now. Do not be the last person holding the bag when the dominoes fall. Wall Street is terrified because they have seen this exact death spiral before. 1973 and 1988. Those are the years the Pentagon and the Federal Reserve are currently feeding into their threat assessment mainframes. During Operation Praying Mantis, the United States Surface Fleet was forced into a massive kinetic engagement just to clear rudimentary naval mines from the Persian Gulf. Back then, it was a localized tactical problem handled by steel and gunpowder. Today, it is a global macroeconomic chokehold. The fragility of our modern financial ecosystem is exponentially greater than the 1970s Arab oil embargo. The United States economy is no longer anchored by robust domestic manufacturing, but is entirely dependent on hyper-optimized supply chains spanning thousands of miles. According to historical stress tests recently cross-referenced by the Wall Street Journal, our current debt-to-GDP ratio makes any sustained inflation spike a lethal injection to the middle class. In 1980, interest rates could be brutally elevated to kill inflation without instantly bankrupting the federal government. Right now, attempting that exact maneuver would trigger a sovereign debt shockwave. The ghost of stagflation has returned, but the structural foundation of the American economy has been completely hollowed out. The historical spark was a regional territorial dispute, but the modern consequence is the absolute weaponization of global energy routes. The central bank is trapped in a burning room, and the fire is spreading exactly as the adversary mathematically modeled. The true scale of this economic checkmate is about to hit the mainland. $110 a barrel. That is the critical threshold where the American consumer economy officially enters cardiac arrest. The Pentagon is staring at a tactical nightmare because the mathematical reality is brutally unforgiving. Let me break down the asymmetric warfare matrix. The adversary is deploying acoustic and magnetic naval mines that cost roughly $2,000 apiece. To counter this invisible threat, the U.S. Navy is forced to keep a $12 billion aircraft carrier strike group on constant station. We are burning millions of dollars in aviation fuel and interceptor missiles every single day just to keep a narrow strip of water from turning into a graveyard for global shipping. This is a textbook war of attrition. They do not need to defeat us in a kinetic shootout. They only need to bleed our treasury dry while we defend the maritime choke points. But the military hemorrhage is just the first domino. The ultimate target is the Federal Reserve and your retirement portfolio. When 20% of the global oil supply is choked off, you do not just pay more at the gas pump. every single component of the U.S. economy requires diesel and aviation fuel. Agricultural transport, manufacturing logistics, retail distribution. It all requires cheap energy. When the cost of transport spikes, the inflation shockwave violently slams into the consumer price index. The FED is currently trapped in a lethal paradox. If they cut interest rates to stimulate a stalling economy, they pour gasoline on the inflation fire and destroy the purchasing power of the dollar. If they hold rates at elevated levels to fight the oil shock, they suffocate corporate America and trigger a massive default wave. Your 401k is trapped directly in the blast radius of this policy failure. Wall Street algorithmic trading desks are not waiting for the government to announce a recession. They are systematically unwinding their positions right now. Goldman Sachs data indicates that markets are bracing for a catastrophic liquidity crisis. And while Washington is paralyzed by this economic checkmate, Beijing and Moscow are executing their long game. According to specialized intelligence desks at Bloomberg, a massive shadow fleet of uninsured tankers is already rerouting global energy flows. The BRICS coalition is quietly facilitating direct oil transactions in non-dollar currencies. They are actively constructing an alternative financial architecture, while the U.S. military is bogged down clearing mines in the Middle East. This is not a temporary supply chain glitch. This is a calculated tectonic shift. The adversaries are using our absolute dependence on cheap global logistics as a weapon of mass financial destruction. They are calling the bluff of the American empire. Let me ask you a direct question. When the true cost of this blockade hits the mainland next month, do you believe the FED will print trillions of new dollars and accept hyperinflation? Or will they trigger a brutal recession to save the currency? Drop your assessment in the comments below. Share this intelligence briefing with anyone who still mistakenly believes their life savings are insulated from global conflict. Because the financial contagion is spreading, and the dashboard is lighting up red across every single operational metric. 72 hours. That is the exact window of time you have to monitor the macroeconomic telemetry before the structural damage becomes irreversible. Do not panic. Do not run to the bank or hoard physical supplies. What you need right now is cold, hard data. Here is your tactical watch list for the next 3 days. First, watch the VIX. This is the volatility index used by institutional investors to price in fear. If that number violently breaks above 30, it means the smart money is officially dumping equities and preparing for a systemic shock. Second, watch the 10-year U.S. Treasury yield. This is the heartbeat of American debt. If the bond market believes inflation is about to spiral out of control, the yield will aggressively spike higher, forcing mortgage rates and corporate borrowing costs into the stratosphere. Third, monitor the Brent crude resistance line at $90. If algorithmic trading desks push the price past that psychological barrier, it triggers an automatic domino effect across every supply chain in the Western Hemisphere. Fourth, analyze the daily CENTCOM briefings. Do not listen to the political spin. Watch the physical deployment of the carrier strike groups. If they announce the movement of additional mine countermeasures ships or air defense destroyers into the Persian Gulf, it means the Pentagon's internal modeling projects a prolonged war of attrition. The data does not lie. The market is bleeding, and the final decision is yours. The crossroad is here, and history does not wait for the uninformed. You are staring at a multi-trillion-dollar macroeconomic collision, and I need your situational assessment on the record right now. Drop a comment with the letter A if you believe the United States military will successfully neutralize the blockade and restore global shipping before the domestic economy breaks. Drop the letter B if you realize the inflation shockwave will obliterate the stock market and your 401k long before the surface fleet clears the threat. Or drop the letter C if you see the ultimate endgame, the total collapse of the petrodollar system as the BRICS coalition finally executes their financial checkmate. The board is set, and the next 72 hours will dictate the survival of the American middle class. Do not face this geopolitical storm blind. Hit the subscribe button to stay ahead of the shockwave and receive the unfiltered tactical intelligence they are terrified to broadcast. This is the conflict room. Stay vigilant.